Well, it's time now for the next of our commissions, our second commission for today, and that comes from Rachel Newton. Now, Rachel is a multi-instrumentalist. She's a fiddler, she plays viola, she's a harp or clarsach player, she sings in both Gaelic and in Scots. She's a songwriter, a instrumental composer. Like all of our artists on the bill today and this evening, she's very much inspired by collaboration with other artists, and she's worked with, she's a founding member of the band The She and also the Furrow Collective, amongst many others. She released her fourth solo album a couple of years back. It's called West, great title. And she's a multi-award winner as well. She won the Instrumentalist of the Year award in 2016 at the Scots Trad Music Awards, and also the Musician of the Year. That's a big one too, a huge one, for the BBC Radio 2 Awards, and many others besides. Here's Rachel to tell us about her commission, which is called Cailin. Please welcome Rachel Newton.
Cailin morún sages rannan mógrain, annar mógri sages cuspan mógran,amenjan an solas vicile kundan. Cailin morún sages rannan mógrain, Bocur mi olas rannan mógrain, Sabrain mi Jesus rannan mógrain, Anglusha oia, Lesgena gespai, Eslusha mesquiada, Marvaini.
So, hello, Rachel.
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Could we start off? Would you tell us a bit about your musical background?
Yeah, sure. So I am from Edinburgh, and I went to a Gaelic-speaking school, Gaelic medium school in Edinburgh, where I did a lot of singing, and I also learned the clarsach there. I got free lessons at school, which was great. I also did violin lessons outside of school, so I kind of had a bit of a classical training as well as sort of traditional music. And I started attending the Fèis Rosh up in Ullapool when I was about 8 or 9. My mum's from Achnaheard in Wester Ross, so that was kind of the connection. I used to go to the Fèis with my cousin Myrid, and yeah, I kind of grew up through that. My mum ended up starting a Fèis in Edinburgh, sort of based on the positive experience that I'd had. So yeah, just kind of grew up through that as well, and ended up going to did my sort of last couple of years at school at the City of Edinburgh Music School. So yeah, that was brilliant, quite intense, a lot of music, and then went on to study folk and traditional music at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne, where I made a lot of musical friends, and who I still play with in bands now, and yeah, now I'm based in Glasgow.
Based in Glasgow. That's brilliant. Thank you. Can you tell us a wee bit about your musical influences, especially in terms of your own writing, your own composition?
Yeah, musical influences, that's always such a tricky question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like having grown up with quite a few different kind of types of music going on, and I guess that was quite an influence on me itself. I was really lucky in the sense that the school that I went to was quite a multicultural school, so there was sort of music from all over the world, as well as kind of our little sort of section of this sort of Gaelic medium unit, which was very sort of traditional, and we did loads of singing, but we also sang like Joni Mitchell songs and Bob Dylan songs in the school assembly and stuff. So it was, I guess, like, yeah, influences from all over the place, really, kind of from an early age. But I suppose, yeah, in terms of writing, I guess Martin Bennett would be a big influence in terms of just sort of the way that he used all of his musical influences so kind of fluidly and fluently, and so with such ease. That's a real kind of inspiration, I suppose. Yeah, it's always hard to name names. There's just so many people.
Do you remember when you first became aware of the archive at the School of Scottish Studies? Would you have heard about that in school or at university?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, definitely. I remember going to visit the archives from quite a young age. I don't even. It's one of those things. It's just like always feels like it's always going to be a part of my life. So I must have been. I don't know whether we went on a school trip or something like that. But I have quite early memories of being in the archives, and kind of seeing how it all worked, and the tape machines and stuff, and just being yeah, that's always kind of stuck with me. But I guess I kind of started using the archives a lot more kind of when I left school and education, because I suppose I was given a lot of songs from other singers and things. I was very lucky in that respect, but I think having that, especially when I went to Newcastle, and on the folk degree, there was a lot of, we were really encouraged to look into old archives and stuff. And when the Tober and Dulwich, when the website came into force, that was just amazing, just to have that resource online. And I've been using it for, especially when I started doing more solo work, been using the archives for songs ever since.
And can you tell us about the piece or the recording from the archive that you've used as the sort of starting point for your commission?
Yeah, so when I was asked to do this commission, because like I say, I've used the archives a lot for finding songs and stuff in the past. So I kind of wanted to do something a wee bit different, and maybe find something that was kind of personal or special to me. And I'd come across this recording before in the past, and I never done anything with it. But there's a recording of it's the school, Achildebury Primary School, were recorded in 1955, singing a song, and I've always kind of been intrigued by it, and I realised that my mum would have been in primary 1 then. She was 5 years old then, so giving away her age there, but I just thought that was a nice kind of, it could be something that I could use, or be inspired by. So I asked my mum about it, and indeed she didn't remember being recorded, but she did remember singing in the choir and singing that song. It's a song, Cailin Morunsa, which is by Donald Ross of Ullapool, and she was telling me that she was in the choir because she spoke Gaelic, but unfortunately she wasn't deemed the best singer. So she was they were preparing for the mod. They were going to sing at the mod, and she was apparently asked to mime in the choir. Which is pretty harsh, especially
That's very harsh.
young,
Yeah.
But I think I can hear her in the recording. So I just thought that would be it felt like to have such a personal connection to something in the archives. Just felt like it would be a really nice piece, something to start the piece on.
That's so special, I think. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that you found that. And I've listened a lot to your piece, and even to the recording from the archive. You can hear the kids kind of shuffling around and things like that, and there's just so present. It's a lovely thing. Yeah, what an amazing thing to find.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I even think I was wondering if I could even hear a burp at one point.
I think there might well be. We'll have everybody who's tuning in will have to listen a few times and see what they can pick out of that.
Yeah,
It's fantastic. What a great thing. And then so from there, from the clip that you found, can you explain a wee bit about how you then developed the piece?
Yeah, so I wanted to incorporate the choir into the piece, but I also kind of I wasn't sure how to. I kind of wanted to respond to it in my own way as well. So I didn't want it to obviously be just me playing along with them or whatever. But I kind of so I sort of used that as a starting point, and then I kind of got myself into the key. The thing about the harp is so nice that you can just put yourself into a key, and then that's you, and you're sorted, and you can kind of be quite free with it after that. And I kind of sort of tried to sort of base myself in the sort of rough tempo that they were singing in, and then sort of come up with, I guess, like a kind of alternative melody, and some different layers on top of that. It was quite. I guess I wanted it to be quite like an emotional response, not like too kind of complicated or kind of thought out, I guess, in terms of the music, like the piece and the melody and stuff. Kind of just it sort of flowed quite freely because I was just sort of trying to be like emotionally respond to the piece, to the song and the singers, and and then I kind of wanted to bring it back, and so I had that idea to bring them back in at the end, and then for me to play the melody, I guess, at the end, because it's such a beautiful melody that I've known. You'll know yourself. It's like a classic waltz, Cailin band waltz, Gaelic waltz. It's a great song, and yeah, so I kind of wanted to incorporate the tune as well, but have my own kind of melody as well. And then actually just having I used kind of the track, so kind of wanting to bring them in sort of during the piece. So I kind of used a couple of techniques to do that. My partner Grant actually helped me. He's been my Ableton. I used Ableton to record this. He's been my Ableton advisor over lockdown. So I used a couple of plugins that with Ableton. One of them is Time Stretch, which it just stretches out. It kind of slows down an audio by quite a lot. And I don't know, you'll hear at one point they come back in,
Yeah.
and it's actually just the track really slowed right down, so that it's kind of like a long note, and that kind of felt like it worked quite well with that section of the piece. It was kind of like quite euphoric, and it always kind of like makes me feel a bit emotional when that comes in. So it was kind of using the audio a little bit. Hopefully that's not too disrespectful to do, but to kind of to have that, and then also a bit of tremolo. So it was like using the singing to, I think earlier on in the piece, just to give a bit of a rhythmic, like the harp's so rhythmic, so I had a kind of rhythmic part on the harp, and then like you can just hear it's almost unrecognizable, but you can kind of hear their voices, just a sort of thing. So just, yeah, I thought that felt like a really nice way of just kind of playing with, like sort of me playing along with the track, but in a different kind of way.
Yeah, it's great. That comes in about 3 minutes, I think, into the piece, and it is like the choir come back in, and it's really ethereal. It's great. I love it, and they sort of surround you and what you're playing. Then it's really. But there's other things going on as well. Are they all harp effects? Like there's some amazing stereo field things going on, and wee delays and.
Yeah, so there's a bit of delay on. I'm playing some harmonics at one point, so there's a bit of delay in that, and it kind of, yeah, it's sort of sort of stereo, and yeah. So if you listen in your headphones, you can kind of hear that going back and forth, and that's something that I've definitely used before. It's kind of, yeah, I think with the harp sometimes, because when you add layers and layers of the harp, especially the electric harp, it's like trying to find ways of making them sound a little bit different to each other, just because otherwise it can be quite overwhelming. It's a lot of strings. It's a lot of strings, just one harp, but never mind like 4 or 5.
Yeah, no, I think it works so well though, because all the layers are in different registers, so you get a really kind of full spectrum of sound, and yeah, it's great. Really enjoyed it, and I feel like there's so much movement in the piece, and it kind of, it takes you on a journey, and then you kind of have to go back to the song at the end, don't you? I think
Yeah.
you almost you need that, you want that, and it's great when it comes back in.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, really good. Yes. So, and the other thing we should talk about is that you've just released a new solo record that you've been working on during the lockdown. Could you tell us a wee bit about that and the process? That must have been so different to anything you've done before in terms of working remotely and the logistics of bringing everybody together. And
yeah. So yeah, I always have this thing where I want to make albums differently every time, and it's quite funny because the last album that I made, which was called West, which actually I recorded in my grandparents' old house in Achnaheard, that was this idea of making an album in a special place in a house, and which I absolutely love doing. And then it's just so funny because I didn't expect, obviously, my next album to be making it in a house again. But lockdown kind of dictated that would happen again to me. So but it was a very different album, kind of. I'd planned to make quite a because West was very very much just me and the harps. It was very stripped back. But this album, my new album, To the Awe, always planned for it to be kind of a return to the sort of full band sound, and quite sort of maybe a slightly more produced sound, and yeah, so very much a studio album, but made in the end in my flat in Glasgow. But it was, yeah, when you know, I planned to go into the studio in April, and when the lockdown kind of happened, it was kind of just deciding whether or not to do it at all. But I kind of was determined to make it work, because I think I kind of just knew that I kind of needed that project to go ahead, just to have that focus. And so Matty Folds, who I've worked on all my solo albums with before, he was great. He sort of found ways of making it work remotely, so he was able to kind of have his setup at home as well. So I could just send, the great thing about the electric harp is that you can just plug straight in to your computer. It's not, you don't have to worry too much about kind of getting the sound exactly right, and also about the neighbours and the outside world. So I was able to do a lot of sort of the tracking and stuff on the electric harp, and also I had a keyboard I was putting in sort of different synth sounds and things like that. So I was able to do a lot of that really easily, and then just send it across to Matty, and he would put his drums on, and he would kind of mix everything. The vocals was a bit more tricky, but I did all my vocals in my bedroom wardrobe. I just had to pick moments where it was quiet enough to do the vocals, but that, and it's tricky. I think the trickiest thing about it was just kind of making my own decisions about what, you know, usually in the studio you can kind of just focus on singing and doing your best sort of take, and everyone else can deal with everything else, and even they can tell you whether they think it's good or not. You kind of have to make those calls yourself. It was a bit harder, but somehow I don't even really know how it came together. And then once we'd done our parts, we sent it off to the three others in the band, Lauren McCall, and Mikey Orrs and Sarah Hayes, and they all added their parts. I was really, really fortunate that everyone had the setup at home that they could record their own parts. And because we'd worked together before, we'd worked together on my previous album, so we were able, and they, you know, we toured as a band as well and done live shows. So I think everyone kind of knew each other well enough, and they kind of knew what I kind of, my sound and what I was kind of after, and everyone just did an incredible job. It was kind of really exciting just to hear it kind of come together piece by piece. You know, and sometimes they would just send Matty things directly, and he would just put it on, and then suddenly just present me with this like this track, and it's just like, wow, amazing. It was great. It was good fun.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing achievement to be able to have done that in lockdown, because it's been quite bleak, I suppose, seeing the diary empty for months and months, and we've all had to adapt pretty quickly to the new situation we find ourselves in. And I wanted to ask you, maybe, I know that you've worked as a producer as well for bands and as a mentor for younger musicians, and I wondered if you might have any advice or any words of wisdom for younger musicians who are finding themselves in this very unusual situation, and how they might navigate or weather this storm for a bit longer.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, it's such a hard time for musicians just now. I mean, I think I've been lucky in the sense that I think I felt quite creative in this time. I know a lot of people have felt really like they've not been able to create, and I don't know why, but for some reason I felt like that's really helped me, and that's the one thing that I can do. But I mean, in terms of just, it's really hard to know. I mean, if if there are ways of kind of communicating with the outside world in your own way, I think it's really important. I know some people feel like there's too much, there's too much kind of content online and things like that. But I think I would really want to say to people that don't worry about that. If you want to put something out there and communicate with people and share your creativity, then I think go for it. And certainly, what I've really experienced is that there's so much support out there. People really want to help musicians just now, and support them. And because I had applied for funding to make this album, but unfortunately, because of the way that I described it in the funding application, being in rooms with other people, I didn't get the funding. So I ended up doing a Kickstarter, a crowdfunder campaign, and I think one of the most positive things that's come out of all of this for me is just seeing what support is out there. When you sort of put yourself on the line a little bit, and it felt quite I know a lot of people have done crowdfunders before, but it was the first time for me, and it felt like a really exposing thing to do, and like really quite a vulnerable thing to do, to ask people to support something like that hadn't happened yet and was a bit precarious. And yeah, I think just seeing what support there is out there was really heartening. I don't know if that's helpful, but
yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you. So my last question then is, can you tell us a bit about your plans for the immediate future, and maybe the slightly the longer term as well? What's next, musically and creatively? And
yeah, what's next? Well, it's hard to know exactly what's next at the moment. I'd kind of, for a while, I'd kind of been going along thinking everything is going to be fine. Like when the clock ticks midnight in 2021, suddenly everything's going to be back to normal. But obviously, who knows when gigs will come back? And I'm very much a gigging musician. I've been constantly on tour. It feels like for the last 10 years or something. So it's been a massive shift for me. But I guess in the immediate future, kind of focusing on, I suppose, the album release, and maybe trying to make some other kind of work around the album. The album is all it's kind of based around the work that I've been doing with sort of women in music and representation of women in music, and a lot of the songs on it are poems written by women hundreds of years ago, and that kind of have women as the focus of their own kind of story. So I'd quite like to kind of maybe do some more work around that, and some more creative work around that, around the kind of album release, with not having the tour that I was going to have in November, and yeah, I guess just focus on as much kind of writing and recording work as I can in just now, and then hopefully next year, all the gigs I was meant to do this year. I'm a bit slightly daunted by the fact that if everything that's been rescheduled all happens next year, it's going to be quite a shock to the system after all this time at home.
I'll be busy.
Yeah, but if it all happens, and fingers crossed, hopefully it will. I've got a residency with the Lost Words Spell Songs project that I'm involved with, which is always just a joy to work with those people and on that work. And there's a new book coming out, a second book, and we are going to go and write a second album.
Oh, fantastic!
In response to that next year. So I think that's just public knowledge. I think it is.
It is now.
It is now. But yeah, that's definitely a kind of a beacon of light to focus on. And yeah, just plotting a few different projects with other people. I think just as much kind of creative stuff as possible.